Courtyard Conversations. I'm your host, Douglas Gutierrez, and today I'm here with the one and only Dr. Jason Shelton. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing all right, sir. How are you doing today?
Man, I woke up this morning. Like I said, any day above 6 feet is a good day.
I heard that. Well, it's an honor to be here. Honor to represent the Center for African American Studies here in the School of Social Work. So
Awesome.
It's all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time. I know you had class earlier today, so we really appreciate you squeezing in and giving us this important time for this important conversation.
All good. No problem at all. Again, it's an honor to be asked to be here today with you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's get started with today's program. Do you mind giving us a short introduction, background about yourself?
Yeah. Dr. Jason Shelton. I'm a professor of sociology here at UT Arlington. Been here 17 years now.
Wow.
I do research on what I describe as the fun stuff, race, religion, and politics.
There you go.
And I chair a committee for the city of Arlington called the Unity Council, which addresses a number of aspects of inequality and disparity in our city and tries to enhance the quality of life. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. Live here in Arlington, have enjoyed it. I'm from Ohio. I grew up in Los Angeles, went to graduate school in Miami. So I've experienced a lot of America and in different places. And I know one of the things we have in common is we got that good old alpha spirit. So we're going to always highlight that along the way, sir.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yes,
it makes sense that you are in sociology. You are kind of aligned with social work and you're doing the groundwork that actually advocates and benefits the community.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've always admired about social work. I think sociology and social work are very similar. There are similar assumptions and ideas that we bring to our research and our community involvement. One of them is essentially the idea of community, the idea of inequality as a part of life, and it's okay that we address it in different ways. I've always enjoyed your faculty. Dr. Jandel Crutchfield is amazing.
Yes, she is.
Taking her research and translating it into the broader social world and trying to address and enhance opportunities for people in our students in the Mansfield Mansfield Independent School District. And I think that's one of the things that social work does amazingly well is that, of course, you all have what I describe as the nerdy professors who teach and do research, right? But what you all also have are people on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who take those assumptions and try to improve everyday life for a great number of people. And I really admire that. We as sociologists, we don't have as much of that aspect. We sort of stick to the nerdy teaching and research part. But I've tried to do my part through the Unity Council over the last 4 years and trying to take those principles, the academic ideas of community and assessing inequality to sort of enhance the quality of life for people here in our city. And so ironically, we just had a meeting last night. We meet in City Hall. Another one of your faculty members here in the School of Social Work, Dr. Darlene Hunter, was there. And she was one of our speakers last night. And she's helped our committee several times over the years as serving as a speaker. And what she does is she's come in and shared her research. I do the same thing, sort of guiding the committee to sort of track what are our disparities in the city, whether those are disparities by race or by residence or ethnicity, gender. There's a number of different ways that we track this, age, a number of different matters. And we track that and we look at research, we do interviews, and we lay a report on Mayor Ross is the current mayor. Mayor Williams was the previous mayor. We lay reports on their desk that have recommendations for addressing inequalities and disparities in our city to enhance the quality of life. So it's been great to be able to take the academic principles and translate them into opportunities to enhance the quality of life in the city that I live in. Right. And that's been great. And again, I think social work has been doing that for a long time. And it's great to be able to sort of take that from a sociological perspective and try to follow you all and what you all are doing.
That's well said, well structured, actually.
Oh, good.
You mentioned something earlier to kind of aligning sociology and social work. Is it more of a bandwidth dilemma or just more of an area of focus in terms of the research and then the practical
That's
stuff?
a great question. I think sociology is more focused on the research. And I think social work, there's a component. Again, not all social workers, but there's a good, strong component of, I don't want to be a professor. I want to be on the ground to help people. Yeah. And I think that we in sociology have that a little bit, but not like how y'all got it. And you all have
A lot of
devoted
passion behind it.
careers,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
devoted full careers to it. We devote this research project to it or those research projects to it, and we teach about it, but it's not necessarily devoting our full career to life on the ground in communities, in challenged communities and impacting people who are experienced difficulties in life. We don't get that the same way in sociology. And so I think that's really sort of career choices along the way.
Kind of transitioning a little bit into the program for today. We are in February.
Yes.
February is Black
Yes.
History Month.
Yep.
Dr. Shelton, what does Black History Month mean to you, and why is it important to continue celebrating it today?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, bro. I think, well, for me, it goes back to on a personal level. I had the honor and privilege of having all four of my grandparents until I was 28 years old. And I knew all four of them very well. And all four of them grew up. I had both of my dad's parents grew up in the segregated South. So I remember all those stories that they've told us over the years about segregated buses and segregated lunch counters and their life growing up in the segregated South. On the flip side, my mother's parents, her mom grew up in Detroit, in a Black neighborhood in Detroit, Michigan. So she didn't grow up in the segregated South. And her dad also grew up in Detroit, but he grew up on the other side of town in a different kind of like the hood for Detroit in those days. So it was a really interesting to hear these, my grandparents' upbringing. What they all had in common was a rich history, but they had different stories to tell. One side in the deeply segregated South, the other ones in the North, where they had more opportunities, but they didn't have the opportunities that white folks had. And so they empowered us with a rich history, a rich knowledge, and told us, go out there in the world and make an impact. And that's what I've tried to do today in my own way. And so I think Black History Month is critical. Black History Month we have had so much to the richness of the history of this nation. Good, bad, and ugly.
All of it. Embrace it.
All of it. We have to embrace all of it. And I think that's critical for, yes, we have come a long way in Black America. I remember my grandfather, my dad's dad, we called him Big Gene. Big Gene was one of them dudes that he never cried. I never saw Big Gene cry over the arc of his life, and he lived to be 92 years old. I never saw him cry. But the night Barack Obama was elected, we were on the phone. And it was my first year here at UTA. I started in 2008, in August of 2008. And in November, Barack Obama was elected president, and I called home to Ohio, and I said, Grandpa, are you watching this? And I heard his voice crack. I heard it.
You heard it kind of leak in the
air. I heard it. I didn't see it, but I heard it.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew. And he said, son, I never thought I'd live to see this. So I know for the arc of his life, he saw more progress in the arc of his life as an older man than he would have never imagined as a young man, which is why he left the South. Right? He was very clear about why he left the South, and he wanted more opportunity. So I know he could talk about the progress that was done, but at the same time, his wife, my grandma, would always say, baby, we come a long way, but we got a long way to go. So we're not there yet. But yes, that's why I say good, bad, and ugly. We've got to celebrate that history. We've got to acknowledge that history, but continue to move forward to close gaps that remain a part of modern day American society. So that's why we need Black History Month to call attention to our rich history, to call attention to the good, bad, and ugly, and help to give us direction on what happens next to make sure that we address inequalities and disparities that have been a part of American society.
I love that. You kind of answered this next one, but I want to be more specific. How has the recognition and understanding of Black history evolved over the years?
Well, okay, that's a good question. I think, when you talk about Black history, you're talking about Carter G. Woodson And there was a time when Black History was not a month, but a week.
Yeah.
Right. And then you hear Black folks say it all the time. Well, why they give us the shortest month? Well, they didn't give us the month. We created this, right? We created the week. It was Black folks who created Black History Week, and then it evolves into Black History Month. And I say all that to say that that's why it's evolved in some dramatic ways in terms of length of time. But it also has to evolve in terms of what we teach our children. I won't get all too deep into it, but there's some research that shows very clearly that over the years, African-American parents aren't passing on knowledge. We don't have conversations at home with our kids related to Black culture and Black history. Study done some years ago that asked American kids to name 5 figures in Black history. And as you can imagine, the most predominant names are Martin Luther King. They can say Rosa Parks. Those are the 2 predominant names. But after that, the names fall off dramatically. In other words, these are the 2 prominent names. Some kids will say Malcolm X. And then some kids start saying people like, Michael Jordan or Barack Obama, more contemporary names, not names that go back. So in other words, what we've got to do is, of course, we're hoping that schools will educate our children on Black History Month. And if they do, they're doing it in February most of the time. And hopefully we can make this longer than February. But what's happening at home? That's what we got to do. We got to talk with our young people in informal ways around the kitchen table about African-American history and about African-American circumstances. It can't just be a February thing. And it can't just be a thing that we allow the educational system to do so. We need to have informal conversations with our children about history year-round and about contemporary circumstances year-round. That's how young people learn history, and it just becomes a part of their lives.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I was discussing with a colleague the other day that this is kind of a lost art. That with the advancement of technology, social media, the digital age. Like, don't get me wrong, I think there are pros and cons to a lot of different things. From the click of one button, I can have food arrive. I can have transportation ready for me.
Yes.
I can talk to my grandmother on the other side of the world.
Yes.
Technology has connected us in ways that we could not have imagined.
No doubt.
But there's always another side to the coin.
Oh, yeah.
Now, where communication used to be a lot more oral and verbally, now it's digitally, and there's a social awkwardness tied to it. There's the uncomfortable, authentic presence that makes people that doesn't allow people to become vulnerable.
Yes.
Specifically with that, how do you think the age of technology has changed the way we transfer information to one another?
I think in the end, what we're talking about is a decline in the sense of community, right? The idea of eye contact, the idea of a handshake, the idea of knowing how tall somebody is. They used to call me Lil J for a reason. You don't know I'm Lil J until you're in the room with me. I'm a short dude, you know what I'm saying? And so over the computer, you can't see that. And over a social media feed, you can't see that. There's a lack of community there. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing, not just in America overall, that what we're seeing is a lack of people who understand other people, and we hide behind the computer for a lot of times, and we talk a whole lot of mess in front of a computer. People will say things over a computer they won't say to somebody's face. Yeah. And so again, it's the role of technology. Now, there's some upsides of that. Don't get me wrong. And I agree with all the things that you said. It's made the world smaller. But we've got to make the world smaller, but also hold on to community, hold on to attachment, hold on to a deeper sense of connection to other people that transcends the technology that's in our hands or at our fingertips.
You also mentioned something earlier about having the children or younger adolescents name icons in leadership. Now, this is from a Hispanic man on the outside looking in. I've heard of conversations that an issue within the Black community is that the Black community looks at sports icon and entertainment as leaders. What's your take on that?
Well, that's always been the case. So you also got to think about this sociologically. What pathways have been open to African Americans historically? Athletics and entertainment have been a pathway. It's not been the same pathway related to education and politics. thankfully, we're at a point where now that is a pathway that is open to us in today's world. It has not been one historically open to us. And that's where that history is important. Understanding what pathways are available to us helps to explain why, yes, even today, some of these young kids, even middle-class African-American families in suburbia, are going to put some eggs in that basket because that's a historical pathway that's been available to us. Now, what some of them parents got to realize is your kid ain't really that good at athletics. So maybe you need to spend a little bit more time with helping that kid become stronger academically.
Get them books.
Right? Heck, yeah, no question about it. And yeah, I do think that there's truth in that argument that some of us, even middle-class African-Americans, have put too much of our eggs in that basket. But I understand why they've done that. Because again, historically, that's been a path that's been open to us. But now we need to convert. Say, yo, you can be on that path a little bit, but yo, as you get a little bit older, homie, make that pathway to get an A in that history class, an A in that sociology class, an A in that English class, to widen the pathways that are available to you in today's world. There are more pathways available. We need to put more eggs in those other pathways as well.
Well said. Well said. I know you emphasize historically a lot. 2025 marks 160 years since the abolishment of slavery. How has life for the African American progressed since 1865?
Again, I'm going to go back to my grandpa's life and my grandparents' life. When I heard Big Gene's voice crack that night over the phone and he said, "Son, I never thought I'd live to see this." Again, I knew then, and I had other signs of success in his life that he made it clear that he never thought some of these things would happen compared to when he was a young boy in segregated Edgewater, Alabama. So yes, I know personally, hearing from my grandparents, I've told you about my dad's dad. My mom's parents owned what we know is one of the oldest Black-owned businesses in the state of Ohio. And so they had a pretty darn good life too. Bought them a nice house out in the suburbs of suburban Cleveland, Ohio, way back in the 50s. Like that north-south thing, I understood when my mother's mother said why they left Oklahoma. They saw more opportunity in Detroit, and that turned into Cleveland for more opportunity, and that was why they left. So my grandparents were very clear about the opportunities that they saw in the arc of their own lives between the late 1920s when they were born up until, my grandma, my dad's mom, just died 2 years ago. So they lived a long time. And so they saw a lot of change in the course of their lives. But again, as Grandma Shelton would say, we come a long way. We got a long way to go. So yes, we've come a long way. We've had a Black president. My daughters will hopefully see another one in the course of their life. And I imagine they're going to see a woman president at some point in the arc of their life.
At some point.
At some point, they're going to see it. So there's going to be progress. America has always been a nation, and Black folks get this. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's been our history for centuries. And as long as we understand that, that's why it's called struggle. You have to be prepared to play the long game. My grandparents played the long game. Generations before us played the long game. We have access in American politics in ways like never before. We're thinking that we're not playing, that this victory means we're not stepping back. We're going to take 2 steps forward and a step back. This is how the game has worked for us historically. It's how the game is going to continue to be played now. This is what our history has been. This is what we have to be prepared to do.
Love that. First and foremost, my condolences for your grandmother.
Oh, yeah. All good. All good.
When I think about what you said in terms of now Black people are in positions politically, they're in positions academically, I think about the concept of a model, correct? Having a model, having a sense of direction for the Black community who historically have not had these successful pathways. A little bit about myself. So I grew up in a Black and Mexican neighborhood, but I was the only Colombian and Guatemalan there. So throughout my whole life, I've always had this identity issue where I didn't know who to kind of categorize myself with.
Right.
When I played soccer, I was always with the Mexican kids. When I was in AP classes, I was always with the white kids. When I was in my neighborhood and my friends, I was always with the black kids. So I never really had other fellow Colombians or Guatemalans to really socialize with.
Yes.
Leading into undergrad, I attended Dallas's only HBCU, Paul Quinn College, where I also pledged Alpha Phi Alpha.
What was it called again? What?
Paul Quinn College.
And what was the name of the fraternity?
Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
Yeah, ice cold boys.
Ice cold brothers.
Ice cold boys. Okay.
Not first, you last.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, servants of all, we shall
transcend all.
That's right.
Yes, we do.
But within my experience at an HBCU, I saw my first Hispanic professor with a PhD. I saw my first Black professor with PhDs. Almost everyone over there has PhDs. And I was never, I hold pride even today with my fellow colleagues. I call them doctor last name. I don't really see myself as a peer academically on a first name basis. One, because it's an elder thing of how I was raised. And two, status. Where I grew up, I never had doctors around. I think it's cool to say, you know, Dr. Shelton.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Jackson.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Hunter.
Yes, sir.
Representation.
Yes.
How important is representation to you?
It's very important. When you see someone who looks like you, who's doing something that you think you want to do, then you know it's possible. And I can't speak for white America in that way, or I can't speak for Latino America in that way, or any other form of America in that way. But I know for Black America, not only for me, but a lot of people that I know, but I also imagine this translates to other groups as well. When you see someone doing what you think you want to do, you know it's possible.
What does that do to you?
It empowers you. It allows you to say what is possible. Until you see someone doing it, you don't know it's possible. And so that's why I think representation is important. One of those facts that I was going to say in the answering the previous question is that, so I know the personal progress of African-American advancement, but I also know it research-wise. One of the things that I study is the growth of the African-American middle class. Black middle class has tripled in size as compared to the 1960s. Like, that's tremendous progress. We got more Black doctors. We got more Black lawyers. We got more Black dentists. We got more Black professors. We got more Black folks living in suburbs. That's part of the reason why you got the out-migration of Black folks from inner city communities who don't know the Black doctors and professors that are out there, because those Black doctors have moved out to the suburbs. So that those Black kids in any hood USA oftentimes don't see that growing Black middle class because they've now migrated out to the suburbs.
It's an access issue then.
Yes, me included. I'm not going to sit up here in front. We moved out of the hood too. So that's the idea. And so yes, representation is key, and these young people need to see that. That's why you've got to take time to give back and to be involved in the community. Absolutely. So that these young people see you. You cannot just move out to the suburbs and give up access and involvement and in participation in the African-American community. You got to stay involved so you can inspire the young people behind you. So if you're going to move, Lil J. Yeah, we did. And we weren't the only ones, but you got to come back and you got to invest in people so that they see the representation, so that they see what's possible. That's a critical aspect of it. They have to see it. If they don't see it, they don't know what's possible.
I knew you were a man of service when I first met you.
Well, I come from a family where I was taught that along the way. So again, I'm going to be sociological. So as a kid in California, I grew up in LA. We grew up you watch the movie Boys in the Hood. That's my hood, right? That's where I grew up as a kid. And I had two parents that were college educated. I had two parents who had nice careers and were college educated. But there are a lot of little homeboys in the hood that my parents had more than. And my mom would buy pizza on Friday night for me and my brother, but she'd buy 2 pizzas and she invite all the little homies that we was playing with outside into the house.
Look at that.
Or at Christmas, she would tell us, Santa Claus, we got to go to the mall and buy some gifts from people on her Christmas list. These are little homies on the block. Why you buying them Christmas gifts? And we'd be like, Mom, don't buy them gifts. And she'd be like, you'll see why we buying them gifts, because they don't have somebody.
Community.
But well, I'm like, Mama, Santa Claus gonna bring them
Right,
gifts.
right,
And
right,
she's
right.
like, no, it don't work like that. And just, and you realize later, here's what she did. And that's when we learn. And I'll never forget, my mama told us, to whom much is given, much is required. And it was the idea that we had more than the other kids on the block. You got to give more. You got it, share it. And that's where we learned earlier in life. Yes, we did have more. My parents had nice jobs, but they gave more. And they didn't just give more out of their pocket. They gave through their involvement in church. They gave through their involvement in other ways, community involvement. And so that rubbed off on us over the years as well.
Now another question sparks in my head, Dr. Shelton. Outside of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the greatest fraternity in the world.
Yes, it is.
Outside of being in a financially positive position, is there a duty to serve the community? Is there a duty to serve your brother? Is there a duty to serve the youth?
I think the answer to that, I'm going to be real with you. The answer is no, there's not a duty, but there should be. You should have it inside you to want to do something for someone else.
Why?
That's a good question. I think the answer has to be morally there should be a reason to do something for someone else. If you want to, but see, I kind of hear where you're going, Douglas. I would want to say, yes, you should. It should be a duty. But the longer I live, I realize we do have more options. We do have more choices. And I see where a lot of us, middle-class African-Americans is who I'm talking about with us, and Black people in general, we're making some choices for less engagement, less involvement. So for example, now I'm going to use this to go into some of my research. And you know this, I'm going to steal one of your questions. You were going to ask me about my new book that came out.
Yeah.
I've got a book that came out about 6 months ago called The Contemporary Black Church, The New Dynamics of African-American Religion. Doing great, man. Go buy my book, y'all, for real. The Contemporary Black Church, The New Dynamics of African-American Religion.
There you go.
It's got great press. It's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, a bunch of websites. I'm going to show up on news in Boston. It hasn't gone live yet. A whole bunch of different things. My point, though, is that what you see is a big decline in the sense of community in Black America, a big decline of engagement, a big decline of people moving away from organized religion in Black America, a big decline in Blacks' beliefs about discrimination, a big decline in a bunch of different things. Religion is the story that I'm telling, but religion translates into a whole host of other changes in Black America. At the end of the book, I have this chapter about community. And what you see very clearly is Black folks are moving away from the traditional organizations, whether it's the church, whether it's the fraternities and the sororities, whether it's political organizations like the NAACP. Black folks are moving away from those organizations. And as a result, we're losing that sense of community. My answer to your question is that more and more of us use engagement and giving back as a choice. I get that choice. It's because they're making it in America. Their lives are so complicated. There's less time to do certain things.
Agreed.
But we got to find the time. You've got to do that. You've got to find it in you to make that choice. If you make that choice, you're going to serve with a smile. You're going to serve because you want to do it, not because you feel like you have to do it.
Yeah, it's not something off the
I want
checklist.
people to want to do it with a smile, to engage. When you do it with a smile and engaging, and you're making the choice, then that means you want to be there. And that's what rubs off on other people.
I think you hit the nail on the head that in today's world, in today's time, especially here in the West in America, there's just less time to actually live.
Oh, yeah.
Because I mean, 24 hours in a day, 8 supposedly have to go to sleep.
Yes.
Another 8 have to go to work.
Yes.
1 has to go to lunch. So we're left with less than, 7-8 hours of the day to actually do things we need to do on top of commutes, on top of restroom breaks. And I wanted to ask, is that more of an American thing, or is that the world?
I think the world is getting faster, but America's getting fast. America's always been fast, but with going back to your point about technology, good Lord, it's moving so fast. Our kids grow up faster. My wife and I sit around and talk about this. We have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and we compare when we were 14 and 16 to this.
Different world.
Good Lord,
Different
it's
world.
night and day.
Yeah.
Much faster. Social media has just made their lives so much faster. They grow up fast. Their sense of a whole lot of things are just much, much faster. You can't turn off the technology. When we were shorties, you hung up the phone, it was over. Now you're getting text messages at all hours of the night.
Track location.
Yes.
All of that. Yeah.
It doesn't end. And so I think this is a fastness of American culture, of American technology and it's happening across the world, but America has always led on some of these mainstream cultural aspects. Our music, our culture, it filters across the world. And I think that's what's happening. So the world is getting faster to the point that we've got to figure out how to slow some of this down. You got to slow, and that's how you get some of that community back.
Right.
That's how you get some of this back, or you got to find some other ways to engage with this.
Dr. Shelton, what's one key takeaway you hope listeners will gain from this conversation?
That's a good question, Doughlas. What I always think about in the context of Black History Month and why we're sitting down here talking today, what I want people to know is that possibilities are available to them. Here we are on a college campus. We have more young African Americans getting college degrees than ever before. As I mentioned earlier, the growth of the Black middle class, it has tripled in size since the late 1960s. I want my students to be a part of that number. I want my students to see what's possible for them. I've been here 17 years. I got students that have gotten law, that are at law schools across the country that started here. I got students working on PhDs across the country and they started here. See what's possible for you. There's so much that is possible for you. And that's when I have to go back to, again, what my grandparents and their lives. There were things that they never thought would be possible in their lives that later in life would come to them. This is not Birmingham in 1942. This is Arlington in 2025. That's not to say that every door is open to us, because remember, my grandmama said we got a long way to go. But I want my young people to dream about what's possible for them. And I don't want dreams to stop them. I always think I have my head in the cloud, but my feet are on the ground. And you figure out what's possible for you and you move in that direction. We're always going to be told no, but you got to get up to the door to let them slam the door in your face. And there's probably somebody inside that room that's going to open that door for you, at least a little bit. But you got to get up to the door to find out. And so what I want people to do is I want them to go for it. I am a professor who always, you can probably pick up on this, Doughlas, I'm optimistic. I'm going to let you tell me no, but I'm going to make it hard on you to tell me no. I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
You got to go for it. And that's what I want these young people to do. I want you to go for it. You're going to be told no, but you got to go for it anyway.
In other words, eliminate your fear of failure or success.
Yes, we're all going to fail. We're all going to fail. But you got to keep it moving. Remember, 2 steps forward and a step back. You got to keep moving. You're going to get the step back, but you got to keep it moving. And that's what I have tried to do over the course of my life. And that's what I want my students to do, to realize life ain't going to be easy, but you got to put yourself in a position to let the doors open.
There's a famous quote, I believe by Frederick Douglass. Without struggle, there can be no progress.
Exactly.
I find that to be, at least more and more as I get older in life, more accurate and very, very true.
It ain't easy. The other thing that's funny to me is that the young people think they're going to, it was, good Lord, this was about 7-8 years ago. Young person said that he was going to make his first $1 million in 5 years. And I'm thinking to myself, good Lord, he ain't got no idea. It don't happen overnight. You got to play the long run. And I hope that young brother made his first $1 million in 5 years. Maybe he did.
Maybe he did.
But it ain't going to happen for most of us like that. It's fair. You got to get ready to play the long run of life. And the funny thing about it is you play the long game of life, It happens quickly. If you'd have told me my oldest daughter is 16, it looked like she was just born like a couple of years ago. It happens fast. So you got to play the long game. It's going to happen faster than you think, but it ain't going to happen in 5 years. It will happen. You just got to give it time. Make smart decisions, get in the game, stay humble, stay hungry, and go for it.
Awesome. Well said. Well, wrapping up our show, I did also want to give you some time to promote some events we have coming up in Black History Month. We have a special guest coming.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, all right, y'all. The Center for African American Studies, every year we have our annual conference. This year, our featured speaker is the legendary Erykah Badu. She will be on campus on Thursday night, March the 6th, from 6 to 8 p.m. in Texas Hall. Tickets are free. Go to utatickets.com to secure your tickets, y'all. The legendary Erykah Badu.
And there we have it. Dr. Shelton, thank you again for your time. Thank you again for your insight. And thank you for all that you do in the community, within Alpha, within the school, and within your life as a human being. We really appreciate you. As a courtesy of our thanks and gratitude, if you look underneath your couch, we have something for you. It's not going to bite you. It's not going to bite you.
Oh, man. Good looking out, brother.
Yes, sir. We really appreciate you again. And we look forward to the future success of your academic and professional life.
06.
06 to the good, bros.